Hello, David.
Jack, good to see you
Good
again.
to see you again.
It's a Friday and you've come in from the Great North Port.
That's where I make my train ride from. The trains were a little haphazard this morning. I thought I wasn't going to make it,
Oh, really?
actually. The train was sitting still when I first went there, but somehow they recovered.
When Ruskin and William Morris first saw trains, they were horrified.
Hmm.
They were called, the Iron Horse, of course.
Mhm.
Now we have the Iron Bird up there,
True.
spewing ashes and terrorism everywhere. The airplane should be banned. Yes, that's right. Yes,
Mhm.
yes, that's right. It should be banned right now because it's, number one, a terrible climate hazard. Number two, it has stopped all traveling. If you want to travel, you're going to have to swim the ocean or get on a nice big boat. But the sooner we get rid of airplanes, the better. Yes, we don't need to go to Mars either. I would be happy to go to the moon or to Mars. I mean, but as long as it's going to be comfortable. But no, the terror of having an airplane drop something.
Hmm.
And they knew that would be happening within 5 years after the first Orville, right? And
I'm sure you and I were, again today, speaking more about the Civil War, and of course, even the hot air balloon was already an aerial threat at that time.
yes, that's true.
Mhm.
That's true. So we're talking about 1861 to 1865. The book that you gave me,
Hmm.
talk a little bit more about it and tell us the author, because I'm about 220 pages of this 1,200-page trilogy where I'm just captivated. I didn't know anything about the Civil War that I need to know and that we all need to know, because last night on the news a commentator was telling us about the current president putting back at West Point after it was taken off. I mean, we're so confused as a country. 2 years ago, every statue of anyone was just broken. And now this Robert E. Lee, this incredibly talented general who was a hero to all of America for when I grew up. I mean, I'm a northern boy, and we were never taught that Robert E. Lee was a traitor. He was a Virginian, and he certainly didn't want to fight such a war. He was an aristocrat. He was definitely a slave owner. That is certainly not good for him. He sold them here and there, and we also hear that he beat them. Not personally, I'm sure, but he was a slave owner. Now, this news commentator made him into a devil. Did you ever grow up thinking as a northern boy?
No, we were talking about the idea of the shift in the mythology that's happened in the last decades. I had told you that I even have to this day on my desk a little book that was given away probably as a little prize to children that was printed by a Boston bank in the mid-century that extolled Robert E. Lee, and what place in America could we imagine was more antipathetic to the Southern cause than Boston.
That's for sure.
And yet, here only less than a century later, Lee was acknowledged as an integrated part of the greater tapestry of our mythology.
Yes, yes.
And I don't mean, when I say mythology, the idea of omitting the truth of history, but what the truth of history did to serve an ethos in spirit. And I think that had become an understanding that Lee had a proper place. Hence that even a child could be given a little memento when visiting a Boston bank of this.
Yes. And this memento had Robert E. Lee on it, right?
What was had a little illustration of him, and it was a little biography, a little tiny pamphlet that was given to children. And I keep it on my desk as a reminder of the notion of the presumption of looking back over one's shoulder with a moral certainty of the present. Because I think Lee is one of those people that is suffered by the moral certainty of the present. Because when I started reading the history of the war, I had an absolute certainty that I would be satisfied at the end of reading one cycle of the course of the war that Lee would be vanquished. And I found my sympathies shifting, not for favorable impressions of slavery, but for a favorable impression of the American notion, as we talked about last week, of self-rule and of protecting one's own landscape, with principally a sense of the gallant. And that's what you and I often discuss in our conversations. How would a present civil war be or prosecuted when we no longer teach our children sense of gallantry, so that when things come to a head, and we would all like to avoid violence, but those men seem to be prepared on how to even meet with regrettable events, and then how to conduct oneself with, again, gallantry, or what you and I always discuss, flair, such that I come away from those books with a tremendous sense of awe about the level of flair, meaning that we must invest with color, how we interact with other human beings, so that even in the most grim scenes in the literature of the war, we find people very much sensitized to the beauty of nature, to the beauty of how we treat other people, even when the next event may be
Their
combat
last.
and their last.
You've just put it so well and articulately. This little pamphlet tells more than any news channel host could ever understand. And in fact, I don't understand why he or who wrote this for him. For this is a very dangerous thing to deny. I'm not talking about the president telling us that he's put it back. He's put it back for reasons that we wouldn't necessarily like. Not because he loved Robert E. Lee. He may never have heard of him.
Okay.
But that it was a political move at this very moment, which could not have happened 2 years ago even, or during his first administration. The fact is that we do not understand anything in this country of subtlety, ambiguity, of real national interests. It's always so, but democracy. No, we cannot be fighting for democracy, because democracy is anathema. We can't be living for everyone to have equality, which is what democracy means for most people.
Right.
You and I know, as people that love the arts, for this program's called No Art, No Life, is that we can't go on pretending that every day is a work of art. It's hideous here right now, and we may lose this country to words, absolute silly words like democracy. Gore Vidal used to call America the alcoholic republic. Well, change the word now to the alcoholic and the drug republic. It's meaningless. We haven't gotten together on anything. And what has politics become? I mean, I'm afraid to say that it's nothing more than the power struggle to keep 700 or 800 people in Washington in great jobs with a status that we cannot understand what status means to the American soul at this time. It's all they have. It's like, what do you want to do? I want to make a lot of money. That's what all the children say. Well, we have to eradicate that. How are we going to be the United States? We were never United States. We were always trampling along, weren't we?
Well, right, and I realized, David, I failed to answer your question that we started with. You had talked about the book that you were reading this past week, and I failed to say that we're talking about Bruce Catton's 3 books about the Army of the Potomac.
Bruce Catton is one of the great historians of the Civil War, without a doubt. I don't know anything that could compare to this man's ability to empathize and to understand the landscape, and to put at the right moment the exact poignant
Yes.
letter home and
Mhm.
to put where these generals are. I mean, this
Mhm.
is an incredible and complicated book, and I think we all need to read it. This is the time.
Agreed. It seems to.
Because maybe we can get a little ambiguity back. We don't really,
Yes.
we don't have any of these finite answers about, after reading this, you start seeing this was a human tragedy.
Mhm.
And as he said, of course all the boys are tricked. We're all tricked to going into
Mhm.
war. I'm going to ask you a very important question afterwards,
Mhm.
whatever you want to say about the book now.
Okay. And we're deferring the question.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that the book, in its exploration of ambiguity and serving as an instrument of literature as much as history, and then when something serves as literature, it serves as a means of self-instruction. We're not just looking back to imagine what other people experienced, but imagining what that experience can do to inform the private heart. And what I think is amazing when I know that I return to Catton is that oftentimes, in terms of it as a work of Americana or Americana,
Mhm.
that it's very astounding nature writing. And I think you already experienced that, where that we can put the cloak of the political present and the gritty metal of the combat present that was there for those men, and it seems to intensify hence the delicacy of the mortal present, so that you have probably some very marginally illiterate young men leaving behind letters that are astonishingly poetic, where they will feel perhaps it's the last chance they have of looking at a sunset or the grass. And he will often talk about, you read a passage where even the air is described, particular to our country. And I understand that soldiers probably have remarked on these things through the ages, but it so well addresses, because it's our war here on our landscape, the scent of the seasons here, the scent of the landscape, and also words that we apply that are peculiarly American. You and I were talking about our love for the word creek, and hence that word that I don't think I encountered in the English-speaking world anywhere else, where a small body of running water is called a run. And all those things just evoke an absolute sense of the endemic nature that belonged to us, and the ambiguities that played out in those places that then remind us the ambiguities that we wrestle with are not something to be ashamed of, that we don't have to have a brittle certainty. And I think that's maybe what you're also hinting at in terms of the political present. What offends me the most is that absolute brittle certainty, and that's why I feel indifferent from almost ever, probably even you've even wondered this. I almost never hint at my affiliations, mainly because the ambiguity gets lost when I do it, because even if I hint at something in the moment, I feel that somehow plagiaristic, and it doesn't have that tremendous talented observation for the smoke that can only be held in the hand for a moment, that this book does such a beautiful job at catching. It's a kind of music.
Jack, you say it so poetically and so honestly, objectively, and correctly. And I go so far as to say that there are so many people in America that have no real roots. They don't feel the way previous generations did about coming here. They come here for different reasons, and they're at a loss. They want to be Americans, possibly. Many do. And I would suggest that you start feeling America through the Civil War, for sure, for the War of Independence, for the great knowledge of the Founding Fathers and what kind of men they were, based on the Enlightenment of the 18th century. But these are 19th century young men, you know, who you say are, they're suffering almost a dismal romanticism, seeing the cornfields of Maryland and the corn higher than the men themselves.
Yes.
And they're playing music even at the banks of the Potomac, where one Confederate army is listening to the Union Army playing, you know, "We're Tensing Tonight" on the old campgrounds, and the other one finally saying, because they have the good band, "Why don't you play some of ours?"
Yes.
And they all knew Dixie.
Yes.
All of this is so sublimely American in its naivete and sophistication, a nation based on hope and an idealism of the 18th century. We have to start now understanding that we can no longer go to war. We cannot have these wars wherever they erupt because of beliefs. When you say, your affiliations, I have no affiliation, I have no beliefs. That's why we're in our trouble. We have a belief. Well, belief in what? Gonna believe in me? Better believe in me than in a lot of things, or you. But believe, as Wagner said, I believe in Beethoven and
Yes.
look. If you want to know about belief can only get you in trouble because if it's not going to be agreed with, my goodness, they're going to hate you. So we have to stop war through belief. And it looks like the human being does not have that sophistication in its evolution, with its reptilian brain still forming and fuming and sputtering and loving to see violence and loving to see unrest. So what are we going to do? Because we really do want to survive as a species. This species created Beethoven and Mozart, remember, and Shakespeare. That alone should give it some ammunition to say, I like the word ammunition there, to say, we better get going to find a way of peace. But in the human mechanism, is there a way of peace? Don't we get bored with it?
Yes.
Don't we get bored with the monotony of let's say, marriage, of taking the child to the school every day? No adventure in a life. Don't you think possibly that war is our only last refuge of adventure?
It does seem to present some kind of universal psychological resistant material. I remember discussing a book with you that I love, I've read multiple times, and the author is William Bryant Logan, and the book is called Oak, The Frame of Civilization. And the ultimate thesis in the book is that, and I believe he even provides a map where oak trees naturally occur, and that civilizations, arts and crafts, so to speak, and professions seem to have their origins in the latitudes where the oak tree occurs oftentimes, because it provides a resistant material against the psychology of imagination, that we need to augment what we imagine by finding something material to resist it. Otherwise, I think it's what you talk about, we're led to boredom in constant speculations that just end up in circles. And I'm wondering if war, perhaps regrettably, is part of the mind's release valve toward finding resistant material, because I think it's Lee, I may be mistaken, but I think it's Lee who says that it's well that war is so terrible, otherwise we would become too fond of it. Meaning the sense of the tremendous kind of pageantry, at least in the preparation to effect it, in imparting to people the notion of the flair element that we talk about, that human beings can use in a sense to become imposing, to broadcast the level of their inner sense of power. And I don't even think it's always even power to dominate, it's a power to project individuality, then I think it goes awry. And then you also mentioned something else that I think that comes out of reading this war. You mentioned the tremendous choice that you made about naivete, about the respective bands playing to each other. It seems premonitory of a kind of Gilded Age naivete, but at the same time, there's an elevated element to the Gilded Age that people like Faulkner for The Sense of the South, or in Ives, and then we were also talking about Copeland, people who can then reference this material that comes into its being around the time of the American Civil War, then the Gilded Age that follows it, how to reference that material without in any way violating its actuality, how it happened in history, but then serving our sense of mythology, which we really built in the beginning of the 20th century, but only just now in the last decade decided it was okay to throw it over the shoulder. And that I don't understand, because that just means not that you have come to a higher truth and disavowed the people that you think weren't as elevated as we imagine we are. What one has really surrendered is the ability to feel the ambiguity that would only elevate one's consciousness.
You are talking about something very subtle, and that most people have never even thought about on a superficial level. all they know is they're Republicans or Democrats, or they voted, or they, fall for this ridiculous one vote every 4 years, and you're part of a great democracy. Oh, this is nonsense, all of this. This is not the fighting for the love of country. What are you talking about, love of country? Can you love soil? Yes, you could love soil for itself, but not because it belongs to Canada.
Right, and yet I guess there's a love of country with the mythology that builds up to serve the individual's notion of ambiguity. We were talking about Copeland, and if I remember rightly, I think he said he didn't delve too much into the biography of Billy the Kid, but he didn't shy away from probably creating a work that immortalizes him more than anyone else. I still am enthralled when I hear Billy the Kid. Sure. It creates a pang in my soul, and then perversely, it also creates a pang that makes me want to investigate the actuality of Billy the Kid. And I don't feel that those things are in conflict. They somehow are complementary, though they are oppositional.
Can you, if you would, tell the story that you were telling me when we were talking about the trilogy? Peyton's, what's his name?
Bruce Catton.
Catton, sorry, Catton. You were talking about how you were thrilled over the fact of a general that had flair, Jeb Stuart.
Oh, Jeb Stuart, yes.
Tell us the story, because this is how mythologies are made, but they have to be made by creative people, because the result is the strange total personal value of what art is to oneself, to, in this case, to codify an experience that through flair made you do this.
Yes, and I think, David, you are certainly a person who has been able to create a body of work, and we see it even all around us in this room. There are those who are so engaged in their lives, however, that in a way we can argue that time hasn't afforded them to leave a material body of work, and yet they knew instinctively that to a degree the life is a body of work, and you can give the impression of that sense of at least the impulse to create art and how we conduct ourselves even under moments of absolutely exquisite duress. And I remember, I think it's in Shelby Foote's Civil War, that I was absolutely taken with this image that caused everyone to gasp in awe when Jeb Stuart was fleeing during a cavalry action and was overwhelmed by superior forces. I may think it might be Custer's forces that were opposing him. So he had to flee, and he was able to jump with his horse over a creek that everyone then looked at in awe because it seemed too wide that any man and horse could then create, in a magic, seemingly transitional yet somehow static moment, the impression of an equestrian statue in the air, of a man who was wearing feathers and braid and flowing locks, and could create this moment that even though the whole country was shattering, there was some aspect of the man that he thought, still we must impart the notion of vitality, even in these moments of critical crisis and tragedy, and impart the idea of, well, the grandeur of living if it comes from within. And so I just remember having to make one of the treks that I do for family visits from here to western Pennsylvania, and just feeling obliged to go find that creek. And it's simply in the midst of a picnic ground, and it also lends itself to things I've meditated in my notebooks as to why we make these pilgrimages, because it doesn't bring us closer to the person, and the landscape shifts over time. And yet I didn't feel that it was necessary, didn't really bring me closer to the moment, but what it didn't do in any way, though the landscape had shifted, impress upon me that the lesson of the impression that the man made was in any way compromised. I still felt the land is such that, yes, it could have happened here, and it probably most likely did, and hence it only reinforced the notion, because it looks so common, and maybe even so changed, that still is our obligation inside, to wear the scarf fluttering in the wind, and perhaps to compel our steed to take the wider jump than we think we can, because it froze in the minds even of his opponents. And I think that's a moment that really is shared between, at least in the literature of men, oftentimes, and this is a delicate topic, when men, I think, are removed from the element of competing for women, sometimes in these books of war, that's an element that I find that I savor very much, where men are in awe of gestures that are made that are not compelled by the underlying absolute force that usually drives us to compete in our more socially static environments, where we think, well, I'll learn to play the piano because this will get me Jenny's attention more than Jim's playing on the football team. But in moments where that element's not there, and men still feel compelled to say that life has a vitality and that we create the life as a work, moments like that in the literature of Catton and Shelby Foote, I must say, I think children are being betrayed when they're told very simple notions of dismissing the Confederate War as simply representative of defending chattel slavery. It's a real tragedy because there's a mythology that serves the present actuality.
I'm taking a silence because what you have said is so breathtaking. And I want you, our audience, to know that my name is David Duvall, and that this man, Jack Cole, probably has more empathy for this country than 20 forces of legions that the Romans misused. And I want to say that this wonderful vehicle that we have, I hope that, we certainly are not technically perfect, and who knows, I hope that we're loud enough. I want you to subscribe. I want you to understand that when you're listening to Jack, that Mr. Cole is one of the great Americans and one of the great thinkers of the world. I am not joking.
Oh,
and you are getting this. You are getting this because we feel that a few people would understand us. But we also live in the despair of a time where we can't find those people to touch,
Yes.
to say hello to have the eye glisten, to see their hair, to touch their hand, to shake hands. No one shakes hands,
Yes, so why do you think that's, outside of the pandemic, why
Before
is
the
that
pandemic,
disintegrated?
well, no, it was, oh my God, you're getting too close even.
Yeah, and I don't think it's mainly, or even really having to do with fear of the microbial.
No,
it's
nobody
something else.
No.
Yeah.
What do you mean the microbian? You just put a dollar bill on you and you have
Yes.
more germs than anyone could have ever imagined.
Yes. Yes.
No, we don't have any harmony ship. We're going back to now what you said. If you notice, the author,
Bruce Catton.
Bruce Catton, he shows us very well how much respect the generals have from the enlisted man or the regular. These men are really living way above. I mean, although they're very egalitarian in the sense that they certainly don't. They go into war and they're not afraid. I mean, we don't have a leader going into war. Every one of them must. If they want to be called the president of the United States, then you go to war with in Iraq. Be there on the front lines like Napoleon. We're not even talking about now something very interesting that has nothing to do with the idea of stopping war, but that there are people that are military geniuses, that it's a mindset.
Yes.
But I want to go back to the fact that McClellan kept that war going. Even he may have made mistakes in Virginia, but without his flair, without his actual talent, my God, where would it be? I mean, we have absolutely 90% of all people that have no, number one, worldview, no spirit left in our time, but we have so many people that absolutely do not have any idea of how to be helpful.
Right.
So we have to teach them. Teaching is a profession that is not just teaching music or mathematics, but teaching about how to handle people in life without handling them.
Yes. That's a really good way to say it, because that presumes a kind of hope that one is gaining something from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
association. And we were talking
I hate this game.
Yes.
It's-
And talk about someone who lived outside of the hope for gain. We were speaking of Copeland earlier,
Mhm,
and you knew him, and you were speaking to the degree of his indifference to gain, ultimately, how much he really genuinely seemed to give the impression of serving art, serving music. And I was thinking, wow, what a degree he has serviced and mythologized the rural kind of conception of America, and yet he's a child of the urban. So hence he seemed to have that exquisite balance inside to know that he wasn't necessarily functioning as an historian. He was drawing on history to inform the present by an alchemy that would create a mythology out of history, and then allow the urban child to still want to think of a rodeo or a Billy the Kid or of a spring in Appalachia when we imagine what.
Those three ballets
Yes.
have done more for the mythology of America than, well, no one even knows who Mark Twain is anymore, basically.
So in knowing, I guess we were talking about the failures of people to touch each other, so to speak. He seemed to have that gift to know what, even if he was, as you were suggesting, somewhat of a private man,
Yes, yes.
that he still had the greater gift to leap over that chasm and know how to impart to his fellow American what he needed to know.
To tie up the idea with the gallantry, I believe every great man, and of course I don't mean men who are not great, who are great creators like Wagner. He's not a great man, but like a Franz Liszt. I mean, this man has a gallantry that is phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
he should have been in the Civil War.
I know what you
You
mean.
know,
Yes.
in a gray or blue. I don't care.
Yes.
What do I care if you're born in Missouri or Georgia?
That's, as have been saying, that's the great magic of steeping oneself in the war. One stops caring about what side. It's as if the blue and the gray become mixed into some other color. I don't know what that color would be on a palette mixed together.
That was one of the saving graces of the war, that it actually did go that way, I believe.
In the sense that,
Well, it dissolved into a color that was not blue or gray.
yes, yes.
We have to understand this. We can't just say, "Oh, Robert E. Lee was a traitor." Of course, he was not a traitor. A traitor is a real traitor. I mean, he was fighting for not a belief, but was forced as well to give you a different belief. And he said, "Well, okay, I'm going to, lead it. I'm a military genius." Well, remember, he's also driven by the same boredom that you and I are, or monotony.
Yeah.
But he has a thing in his mind. I mean, Napoleon's genius probably rivaled Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
These men see things in the martial sense in a way that we don't even have any vagueness. These cadets running around from West Point or whatever, they're not understanding the positions and where they are, and they have nothing but field glasses, How did they get it all moving at all times? And everyone was cognizant of it.
You're right, and I don't want to equate war with counterpoint, but to a degree there must be some faculty of the mind that's similar.
Or to glory, because that's the trick. It
Yeah.
soon falls away, that glory, even, when you're filled with monotony.
But you're right, there's some kind of gift that perhaps had it been funneled somewhere else, it might have demonstrated itself in another way. But there are moments in Lee, in terms of looking at the talent, if you will, that create scenes again in our mythology, that if I had a time machine, I would say, wow, in terms of the human sense of flair, I guess one of the moments that I would use up on the finite privilege to be on the time machine would be see the two wings of Lee's army come together at Chancellorsville and thwart a superior force, because you mentioned Napoleon, and presumably Napoleon's maxims were filled with, or would fill the conversations of both rebel and Yankee soldiers at night around campfires. And yet, as technology changed, it was the genius of the person who can conceptualize the map, if you will, even in an artful disposition in the idea of thinking in 3 and 4 dimensional ways that other people can't think of. Just the way a composer, to a degree, has to think in the way things will eventually show their outcome.
That's why Beethoven said, I could have been as great as Napoleon, because
Yes.
he understood music as a tremendous maneuver.
Yes, and that's exactly it. It's not always just the idea of being a dominating temperament.
Right.
It has to do with a notion of taking what nature gives us and how do we...
Distance.
Yes.
The bad luck at Waterloo, all this, how does Napoleon, after being on an island, he comes back for his 90 days, and he's idolized once again from the moment he lands. I mean, what kind of magnetism did this little man have? And he gets together the Grand Army, and he's back in business. But before that, how does he get 500,000 men who are slaughtered to still love him, whoever exists still? How did they do that? How did he get from Paris with his Grand Army to his defeat, which was bad luck also, in Moscow? How did he know where to go? I mean, there were no maps. Nothing was easy. You didn't have a fax machine or a telegraph or anything.
You're right. There's a degree of intuitive talent.
It's great genius.
Yes.
It's more than that. It's a desire for using that, and in his case, in a very amoral way. I mean, he's just going to kill you. I mean,
right.
And now, if that's a beautiful picture, I'm going to steal it from the museum.
Right. Yes.
And he brings it back, and the Louvre becomes the great museum.
That's right. I even hear myself in our discussion avoiding the use of the word genius because of my own cowardice from the contemporary pressure not to apply it to men of the 19th century who were so engaged in the materiality of the world without guilt. I'm sure they had guilt, but not to the degree to which it's imposed from without upon us now. So
the guilt may have come, from the Christianity, but already very deep in them, they were not believing in any of that.
That's another thing we were talking about today. It would fascinate me to know how much faith was figurative to these men who professed it, and I believe it when I'm hearing it from them, and yet I don't detect the zealotry that felt that they were dealing with actual personified moments of intervention from a personifiable deity invested in what the outcomes would be. I felt that it was figurative, even to them.
The talk about God was figurative, and it was not as important as we probably think it was.
Yes.
Because it was so ubiquitous. It was everywhere. It was in every letter,
Or again, as I'm trying to credit my love for, say, Catton's work, I think they were also using it as a literature to inform the metaphorical interpretation of their present, as opposed to...
I think we may, by mid-19th century, not giving them enough credit.
Yes.
As just, stupid little believers in a mythology.
Agreed.
Well, I think that we've discussed the Civil War very well today.
Yes.
It's an ongoing topic. I'm still reading. I have a long way to go in the Catton book. What a guy.
Agreed. I was stunned when I came across it.
And thank you for that book. And I hope we can sell a copy or two here. And I want you to visit us again and go backward and hear all of the ones that we've missed, because I think we've had many, many topics.
Yes.
There's nothing that we can't find some fun in talking about.
Agreed, yes.
And the word FUN is a much better word than the 4-letter word.
Yes, it is.
Which I'm really getting very sick of. Will the media give that up?
I don't think they can, at least right now. They do seem to love it.
Well, I know that we now are moving towards the 1 billion people that are watching us. I want more. I want, just like all the money people,
Okay.
more money.
Well, we're climbing.
Good to see you again.
David, thank you so much.
Jack Cole, David Duval, thank you for listening, and do listen every week.
Thank you.